They're in a state of emergency. 40 million Americans have lost their jobs since the pandemic struck. They're in a state of emergency as they stand in long lines at food banks, right? And so, I think that this is compelling us to think about state of emergency in much broader terms, and just conversations and saying, can we all get along, may not address all those kinds of states of emergency that have led to this frustration and led to these outbreaks.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what the message is. The thing that we remember, the way we remember, can we all just get along, from 1992, what we'll take away from this in years to come, and hopefully not find ourselves back in this place again 20, 30 years from now. Is that your hope?
Yeah, this has really been, this pandemic crisis is so unprecedented. It's something we haven't experienced. Our parents and often even our grandparents haven't experienced anything like this. It's a real kind of social upheaval, right? We've gone through physical earthquakes in California and Southern California. This is kind of a social earthquake in which we're kind of seeing the tectonic plates shifting under our feet. And we can either rise to the challenge and say, well, maybe we can make some basic changes so that we, when we walk through Skid Row and we look to the left and right and see that all of these people are in states of emergency, and they're all, by the way, 75% of those faces are black. And then we walk into, we look at the COVID crisis itself, and we see it's disproportionately hitting the black community. And we see that, we really have to reckon as a society and even as a community here in Southern California with all of these kinds of, to continue the earthquake analogy, with all of these kind of shifting plates, with all of these, kind of fissures, social fissures that we're dealing with. So hopefully we can find the will, because we, at the end of the day, are all we got. We have a beautiful place here. We have beaches. We're the envy of much of the world in a lot of ways, but we can forget that there's a lot of social inequality under the surface. And once in a while, something like this comes along and it rips the scab off of a festering wound. And we start to have to confront that and realize that unless we can work it out so that we can lift all of our brothers and sisters into some minimal level of decency and decent living standards, that we're always going to be on the brink of another one of these kinds of eruptions. And so, in the long run, my dad used to say sometimes cheap is expensive. Sometimes if you get something cheap, it's just, you wind up having to get something else the next day or the next week, and it becomes more expensive. Sometimes the cheap way out, not addressing our underlying social problems, gets to be more expensive than really confronting those problems and paying now to avoid paying a lot more later.
Jody, if you were advising the mayor, chief of police, the sheriff, the governor on this, what would you say to them?
Oh, well, that for one thing, it's going to be hard, Mayor, but, a coalition of community groups and activists helmed by Black Lives Matter itself has been pushing to slash funding for the LAPD for the last couple of weeks when the mayor proposed the new budget, a kind of belt-tightening budget. And the budget cut virtually every other city department, but actually increased funding for LAPD. And so a lot of community activists have been saying we need to cut and slash funding for the LAPD and reinvest in social work and social workers, housing, public transportation, health care, and other kinds of services. Right now the police budget takes up about 53% of the unrestricted funds, and so 54% of the total year 2020 to 21. And so the idea may be to fundamentally rethink policing, not that 54% of the city's unrestricted funding down to maybe 44 or 40%, and find ways to, fund social workers and housing and public transportation, and to make us a more egalitarian society, a more equal society, and a more, just society, and maybe that will address a lot of the kind of concerns
But
that
Jody,
affect
for argument's sake here, people watching this tonight might not want to cut the law enforcement budget when they see what's happening here. Can you understand that?
Absolutely. That's the irony here, isn't it? That, perhaps the lack of spending on those kinds of things I just talked about, like housing and public transportation and healthcare, have led to all of this frustration that then spilled over and led to this unrest, seems to be justifying now the desire to spend more on law enforcement so that we can quell this unrest. But that's what I mean about we can spend to quell the unrest, or we can spend to prevent the unrest from reaching these kinds of intense levels in the first place. And so, yeah, it's going to require us to even in the middle of a moment like this, in which we really are worried about, not having enough law enforcement, to recognize that, in the long run, we cannot arrest our way out of these problems. We can't use law enforcement like we use now. Our jails are sometimes the social receptacles, kind of the receptacles of our social failures. When we don't handle mental health care well, we put them in jail. When we don't handle, homelessness well, we outlaw being homeless, and then we put them in jail. So it's going to take reimagining some approaches. And I do hear what you're saying. It's a very valid point. It's really hard to think that way right now. But the only alternative is to just continue this, social justice Groundhog Day cycle that we never get out of.
Well, Jody, if you would stay with us right now, we just want to talk a little bit to what we're seeing on the air right now, live. Gil Levis is in News Chopper for Bravo, and as you've been talking continuously, we have been seeing people going in and taking items out of this Melrose Mac, and it's just been going on the entire time, people driving up. Gil, can you speak to this a little bit, what you have been seeing as we've been talking to Jody, listening to his insight that he's giving us into what needs to change and how we need to change the way we think about things. What's going on right now live?
Yeah, Kathy, let me pull out and show you a lot of cars that are pulling up in front of the store, and what we're seeing is basically self-service here. People are pulling up, people are jumping out and running into the looted store here. This is the Apple store, Melrose Mac, 6600 block of Melrose at Highland. And you can see individuals inside the store right through the window. They're running around, scampering around, grabbing items and pulling out the boxes through the windows. You see this individual there going through one of the holes there in the window underneath the guardrail gate there, coming through, and then he'll run off to an awaiting vehicle in different areas. He's going to cross the street and go off
so
right
dangerous.
in front of that
Look
car.
at that car. Yeah, Bill.
It is so dangerous, these people taking chances like that, and they're going right back into the store, and so it's pretty obvious when we see these lines of cars. That's why the airships are, the police airships are focusing on the vehicles that are driving around, because for the most part, the curfew is in effect right now, and people should not be out in their cars driving around. So it's almost easy pickings for the airship to focus on these businesses along Melrose and to watch the vehicles pull up. We'll see if that happens here again, but you see individuals running back and forth in and out of the store once again here at the Mac store on Melrose.
And Gil, the problem is the police are, for the most part, on foot in this area, correct? So it would be hard for them to get over here?
They are, because their cars are lined up behind the skirmish lines, so they would have to break the skirmish lines, get in their vehicles, and make their way over here to this area. So it makes it very difficult for those ground units to get back into their vehicles and get on scene here. But they've been mobilizing some of the units. We did see that one traffic stop with 3 vehicles. They were taking out those suspects and putting them on the ground, and then they're going to go through their vehicles. But here is another